Hello, it's Keegan. Today we have a really cool episode for you with not one, but two different guests who will be speaking with us today. But before we get into that, I just wanted to quickly plug our Patreon once again. Patreon is a way that you can show your love and support for the work that we do on this podcast. Now, it is completely optional. Our lowest tier is at $5 a month. And by becoming a Horstorian, as we are calling our patrons, you gain access to bonus content as well as ad free episodes. So, if you are willing and you find yourself in a financial situation where you would like to support us, then feel free to give us a visit at patreon.com/historyfromhorsebackpod. All right, thank you very much. Without further ado, let's get started with today's episode.
Hello, my name is Keely,
My name is Keegan.
and welcome to History from Horseback. Today's episode, we are excited to welcome two guests to the podcast.
Our guest, Susan Friedland, is an equestrian author and lifelong horse lover whose passion was reignited by a childhood classic. After rereading Misty of Chincoteague in 2018, Susan embarked on a 2-year journey to uncover the life and legacy of author Marguerite Henry and her famous pony, Misty. That research became the heart of her acclaimed book, Marguerite, Misty and Me, and its young reader adaptation, which debuted in 2023 during Pony Penning Week on Chincoteague Island. Since 2013, Susan has shared her equestrian adventures and insights on her award-winning blog, Saddle Seeks Horse. She's also the co-host of Barn Banter by Horse Illustrated podcast and spends her days learning dressage with her off-track thoroughbred Tis a Knight.
Our second guest, Amanda Geci, is Vice President of the International Chincoteague Pony Association and Registry. She's also a manager of the Chincoteague Pony Pedigree Database, manager of the colour research website The Colourful Chincoteague, and co-manager of the Misty the Chincoteague website Misty's Heaven. Susan and Amanda, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us. We're just so excited to talk about ponies and to bring more people into the fold.
It's definitely not a cult. It's fine.
Well, actually, you know what? So Amanda actually owns a Chincoteague pony, but when I was first researching for the book, there was one person I knew in Texas who had a Chincoteague pony, and I sent her a DM. And I was like, hey, I think I'm writing a book about the Chincoteague ponies. Do you think, could I interview you, or do you have some other people? And she basically said, welcome to the cult.
Perfect. Okay, well, to start, we have a question that we ask everyone who comes onto the podcast. How did you get started with horses?
I don't know. You just love them. I think it might be genetic because I had a grandfather who was an attorney by day and a horse rider by night. He had a saddlebred mare named Susie and another quarter horse named Dawn. And my parents chose to name me Susan Dawn. And
Oh, wow.
so, yeah, but by the time I was born, he was older and didn't have his horses anymore. But I distinctly remember being probably in around fourth grade, and we lived in this, small village that was kind of farmland adjacent, but not an equestrian community by any means. And my older sisters, they're 7 and 9 years older than me. I was probably, playing in the front yard, bouncing around on my Mickey Mouse thing that looks kind of like one of those yoga balls. But this black and white Pinto came striding up the lawn, and it was one of my sister's friends, and she was there to, I guess, show this horse that she was riding to my sisters, and they took turns, and then they said, "Do you want to ride?" And I had ridden pony rides before, but they let me get on, and she taught me how to neck rein real quickly, and so I rode around the front yard and the backyard of our house, and I was hooked from that day.
That's how they get you.
So I'm not really from a horsey family, but I had a friend in fourth grade, and she was really into horses, and so she kind of brought me into it, and she collected briars and brought me into that too. And a family friend gave me a copy of Misty. They had lived in the Baltimore area and heard of it. They've actually never, still to this day, have never been to the island, which we keep trying. But I've been hooked on the ponies ever since then, and my parents were always up for a fun road trip, so we went in '95 and have been going periodically ever since. It's a long trip, so we don't go every year, at least to the swim. I try to get up there at least once a year.
This next question is also for both of you, so you can figure out who gets to go first. But can you give us a brief history about the ponies of the Chincoteague and Assateague Islands and what drew you personally to them?
That is an Amanda question, 100%. So I'll let her
Okay.
go, but then I'll talk at the end about what drew me to them.
Yeah.
So Chincoteagues hail from an island off Virginia, Assateague, even though the neighboring island is the inhabited island, and that's Chincoteague. But they're actually one of the first native pony breeds in the U.S. There have been ponies out on grazing on Assateague since, well, we think around the 1600s. You know, there's various theories how they got out there. The one popularized in Misty was a Spanish galleon wrecked and the ponies swam ashore. And of course, there are a lot of wrecks out on barrier islands. But the island's a great natural fence. You know, you can put your stock out there, and you know they can swim, but it's a good way to keep them. You know, back in the day, multiple owners kept ponies out there, and they brand them with their name, and then that's how they started rounding them up, so you can claim the foals and that you own. And then the Chincoteague Volunteer Fire Company took over management 100 years ago in 1925 after a fire, actually two fires. And then they started the organization of pony penning, even though the tradition is much, much older of rounding up ponies. But the formal started 100 years ago. They have a grazing permit with the Fish and Wildlife. You know, they were somewhat known. There were actually a lot of people would go to pony penning prior to Misty Misty was born in 1946, and then the book was published in 1947. But that kind of made it a household name, at least among kids that loved horse books. You know, the fire company, they take care of them year round, and they occasionally, back in the past, they would outcross, put other breeds out there. Arabian Mustang is probably the most common, at least from the research I've done. And some of that is to help with inbreeding, and some of that was to help when there were natural disasters or disease had struck the herd. That's happened multiple times. They really don't do a whole lot of, they don't have breeds anymore, at least not since the 90s. I think it's probably a good idea at this point. But the original ponies were all short. You know, talk about the ponification. Yeah, they were definitely affected by that. I say that interesting nowadays because there are a lot of 1/4 Arabians still running around out there now, and I mean you can pick them out, but you know you're going to still see the ponification happening even with that outside blood.
That's great.
Yeah. So Misty's story is, of course, what originally drew me to it, and just there are ponies and horses on other barrier islands up and down the East Coast, but the Chincoteague, it just seems to be enduring, and it seems to draw more people into the breeds.
So I would say one thing that I noticed when I first went to Chincoteague, I guess it was 2022 for the first time, I had been following a number of Facebook pages, some of photographers that hike the island, and they're showing all the mares and the new foals. And so I had become very familiar seeing them in photos. And then when I was first there, I couldn't get over how short they were, because I feel like when I think of a pony, I think of like a kind of Thalwell or like a little Shetland or something. And I was like, I don't know, they come across, some of them in photos, like really well put together, like a horse.
Mhm.
And anyway, so that's a little tangent, but I was very shocked at, like, oh my gosh, they're so much smaller than how they appear in photos. Probably like celebrities,
Yeah.
tend to be shorter. But I was drawn to them. Well, I'm tall, I'm 5'9", so I've never had a pony, but just I became kind of obsessed when I reread Misty of Chincoteague in 2018. And then along with that fact, I grew up in about 5 miles from Wayne, Illinois, which is the little town where Marguerite lived when she brought Misty home from the island. And so when I was a teenager, my mom brought home this black and white picture from work, and the woman that she worked with is on Misty. She's a little girl. It's a black and white photo, and she's got a cowgirl hat on and boots. And there's this beautiful, pinto pony. And my mom said, "This is Misty." And so I just thought, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Because it didn't really occur to me that she was a real pony,
Hmm.
because I knew the story and I love the story. It was one of my favorites. So anyway, then when I went to Chincoteague the first time and met Amanda, and I know I'm being silly with this, but it is true. I was just very I don't know, I just felt very welcomed. I'm a thoroughbred girl. And I didn't know anything about the Chincoteague ponies, and the people I talked to were so willing to share about the breed and just very welcoming. And I just thought it was a very cool, equine subculture that I wanted to learn more about. And one of Amanda's coworkers, not the right word, but Rebecca Hart, who is someone who works with Amanda for the breed registry. I called her, this is before I met Amanda, and I was doing an interview over the phone. I'm in the Chicago area, she's in the Minneapolis area, and she was like, "Well, come on out to the farm and ride one of our ponies." And I was just blown away by that, because I thought, she doesn't know me. She doesn't know what kind of rider I am or if I'm a good person. And so I met her at the farm, and she saddled up her mare, Pixie, who is a Palomino Pinto like Misty, and let me ride around. And we spent the afternoon together riding. And I just thought, I I don't know. I've back in the past when I was younger and didn't have a horse of my own. You feel kind of like the other or the outsider. And even though I'm an insider, I've had a horse for many years at this point, there's these tender childlike areas of your heart. And so it just meant so much to me that Rebecca wanted to share her pony with me. And I've just found kind of that generosity and just willingness to talk. And I will text Amanda certain things, wanting to find out about a certain pony or a stallion from back in the day. And I'm thinking, like, I know Amanda's at work and I don't really want to bother her, but she just is like such an encyclopedia of Chincoteague pony things, and she always responds. And so it's just a cool community.
That's so sweet. That's awesome. I definitely feel like there is something to the Chincoteagues that like really draws you to them. Like especially because I just recently reread Misty for, in preparation. Um, and it's like every little horse girl's dream to like live on an island where there's like next to another island, but there's just horses that are just or ponies that are just running around, and you can like just kind of basically adopt one or like buy one and have it as your own and that kind of thing. Like that just seems like the dream to me. So I think there's something almost like childlike and whimsical about them that seems to draw people.
And I want to add to that because I have been, I'm not showing right now, but I grew up and I was showing in the hunter jumper world. And then I was boarding at an eventing barn, and I'm not an eventer. And now I'm learning dressage and I'm at an eventing barn. And so I feel like in the horse world, at least for me, when it started out in Wayne before I had my own horse. So after that ride in the black and white Pinto, I flash forward a few years, and there was a family that my parents met, and they lived in Wayne, just a few miles down the road from where Marguerite's house was. But by this time, she was in Southern California. And they were like, "Oh, your daughter likes horses. Have her come on out and ride ours." And so there was this 25-year-old bald-faced chestnut quarter horse named Jim Dandy that I got to ride. And no helmets. This is before cell phones. And I would just go off with these other, adolescent girls my age and ride around in the fields and trails. And we took the pony swimming. And so that was my entry to the horse world. And as I've gotten older, I'm a middle-aged woman at this point. It's like we go into the specialization, and I'm trying to ride a correct dressage test and get the free walk and have contact at the canter. And when I went, rode that day with Rebecca on her Chincoteague pony, and then just being on the island and meeting other people who said to me too, like, "This is my first time. This is a bucket list thing." It like took me to that place of just having newly fallen in love with horses again. And I love my horse. I love my thoroughbred. I love training. I want to be a better rider and horsewoman, but there's just something so simple and pure about just like the Misty story, just that love of having a pony of your own, and it's like your best friend. And so that's so beautiful.
So this next question is for Amanda. What is the Chincoteague Pony Registry, and what role do you play in the registry?
So I'm one of the co-founder, and I think we've decided on vice president. I also manage our stud book online database. So there's been a couple of registries through the years. One of them the fire company ran for many years, and then they finally shut it. And of course that left, and then another friend, she started picking that up and tried to fill the gap. But we reached a point where you could not get papers for your pony. And Rebecca Hart, she approached me because I already had this database of trying to keep track of the bloodlines, both island ponies and off island ponies. That's mostly, I felt like that information was scattered about in the breed community. And I found somebody who could build me a database, Gina Aguilera. And so we put that together. So I felt like we could put it in one place for research. And so Becca was like, I can't get papers for my herd of ponies. And so let's start one. And this was in 2020 in the middle of COVID. And so we started on it. She did a lot of the hard work, the legal stuff and the business side. And so yeah, we register any pony that comes off of Assateague, and then any pony that has two parents that you can verify are Chincoteague pony. Because there's mine, for instance, she was born in Pennsylvania. She's a great granddaughter of Misty. Her dad came off the island, and then her dad was also born in Pennsylvania. So we have those. So we kind of track. Generally, we know some of the others that were born other places. So they still pop up sometimes. But and then we also added a half registry, kind of based it off the Arabian model. And I said partially that we needed that. It's popular cross. You cross on some other breeds. Marguerite Henry's last books was about a half thoroughbred, half Chincoteague pony named Misty's Twilight. So for Twilight, I think we need to have a section for halves. This year we added a training incentive. You spend so many hours working with your pony, you get certificates, and then we eventually want to do the same thing to get your pony out and about, showing, expos, things like that. We offer just general breed information, brochures and such for people going to expos, and just try to support the community to get out and share their ponies.
That's so cool. I didn't know it was such like a, I guess, modern creation.
Yes, yes.
So then my next question for you, Amanda, is what is the pony swim?
So the swim is the highlight of pony penning. The weekend before the swim is on Wednesday. Pony penning is the last week in July, where the Wednesday and Thursday are in July. So the weekend before, they round up the ponies, and because they're all scattered all about. And in the Misty movie, they do it all at once, but nowadays they don't. But so bring them in, they have corrals, and then so the herds are in two different compartments. I like to say that they fence them away from people now. So the northern compartment is much larger, and so this is my mom's favorite part. They bring the northern group down the beach on Monday morning right after sunrise, and then they meet. There's a corral on the road to the beach, and that's where the southern group is. That's on Monday. So on Tuesday, then they'll ponies get vet care. So they vet them, and then they pull out any pony that's too old, too young, injured, and so they don't swim. They get trailered over to Chincoteague, and then the next morning is the swim. And so it started with a way to get the ponies across and to be a spectacle, which it still is. But they swim them from Assateague to Chincoteague. They swim it at slack tide, so that there's no current that are tugging on the ponies. But it's really not that far. It takes less than 5 minutes for them to go across, and then they rest on the other side for a little while, and they get driven down pony swim lane, and then driven to the carnival grounds, as we call it, because there is a carnival there. Driven through the streets of the island, and people line the road both sides, and then they go to the pen that's at the carnival grounds until the next morning, when the foals are auctioned off, and that raises money for the fire company for their use and to take care of the ponies for their care. So any foal that's too young to go home at that point, then they have to come back at a later scheduled time to pick them up. And then Friday is another pony swim. The southern group they swim back to their compartment on Friday morning. So there's two pony swims that week. The northern group gets trailered back to theirs. So it's much smaller. Actually, I like that one. It's much more low key. But that's pony penning and the pony swim.
Can I ask some follow-up questions real quick? Because I'm curious. So clearly not every single horse or pony gets like auctioned off or that sort of thing. So it's primarily just like the foals who are old enough to leave their mothers.
Yes. Every foal is auctioned in some way. The fire company keeps anywhere from 5 to 10 back for breeding stock. They pick out which ones they want, and then they sell those as buybacks. And those are actually the most expensive. You get the privilege of naming it and the bragging rights, but that's about it. The fire company keeps ownership.
Okay.
But every other foal is sold.
Okay. And they all technically belong to like the wild ponies. They belong to like the fire company, or
they belong to the fire company.
Okay.
They're actually all microchipped.
Wow.
So they
That's
do
cool.
vet checks. They swipe, make sure they have vet records on every pony.
So kind of similar to like some other herds I've heard of that are like technically owned by people, but spend most of the year being kind of a wild herd, and then they get rounded up for things like this. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And there's another roundup, usually sometime in March. We call it spring roundup. And then another one in the fall, usually around October. I think it was in September last year. And that's kind of a last check before winter. And so they just check them over, and then in the fall, kind of the late born foals, then they will go to their new homes also. So, but they keep an eye on them year round. If a pony's limping and a boat captain or a hiker sees it, they call the fire company and they go check it out, and they might pull it off the island and take it to the carnival grounds for care and things like that. They make a lot of money for the fire company, so they take really good care of them.
Mm.
And Amanda, if I may, you should tell them about the high bid buyback from last year, because that's kind of a heartwarming story. I could see Marguerite Henry, if she were alive today, writing a book about that one.
Yeah, so it was early May last year. One of the mayors, she I'm trying to remember what they finally decided it was, but she went down, had a foal on her. They tried to bring her back, but she was too far gone. So I had to put her down, and then her foal was put on one of the fire company families, the Leonards. They have ponies as well, and so they had a mare that had foaled, and so she adopted this filly from the island, and so they decided to sell her as a buyback and keep her on the island. And so when she auctioned, she went for $50,000 to a large group of people that had raised money. That's generally how it works nowadays.
Gosh.
People that all get together and pool their money. But her name is Wildfire's Phoenix, and she's actually a Misty descendant.
Wow. That's a great story.
And the best part was last year, I had decided it was my third bull auction, and I'm not buying a foal. And so I was like, hey, let's just, go over to the auction ground, see what's going on. And as I got there, I recognized the filly because she had been on all the social media posts and they were auctioning. So that was the only one or two foals that I stayed for. So I timed it perfectly. And they're like, we just set a record, and everyone was so happy. And
Wow.
cool.
So you got to see her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, back when 95, 96, it was a big deal when one sold for $5,000.
Yeah. Wow.
But generally, if you're taking one home, it's not that expensive. You'll see 10 and 12,000. That's on the high end. You may also see, $2,000. So still high for a feral foal.
Yeah, still more than typical Mustangs off of BLM land go for. So my next question is for you, Susan. What inspired you to research Marguerite Henry's life and eventually write a book about her? Do you feel connected to her in some way?
Do you have 3 hours? Okay. So in 2018, I happened upon my childhood copy of Misty of Chincoteague, the light blue cover, and I wasn't even looking for it. It was on my bookshelf, and I was a middle school teacher at the time, and I taught for many years. And so anyway, I pulled it out, and it was like finding an old friend. And so I thought, I should reread this. I reread it, and my mind was blown at how amazing of a story was. I knew I loved it when I was a kid, but now as an adult and as an educator, it was even more magical. And I couldn't get over just the emotion it brought out in me, and also the word choice. And it was just so beautiful and timeless. And so because, as I mentioned earlier, I learned how to ride on borrowed horses in Wayne, Illinois, which is the same village where Marguerite lived in the 40s until about 1970. And that's where she really had kind of the golden age of her writing career, writing Misty of Chincoteague. And I started, and I was a middle school history and English teacher. So I always talk to my students about the importance of oral history. Talk to your grandparents, find out what life was like when they were young, and what did they do after school, what kind of school did they go to, that sort of thing. And so anyway, I have an equestrian blog. It's called Saddle Seeks Horse, and I had written a few other books, and I also write for a number of horse magazines. So I was kind of like, I should probably see what I can find out about Marguerite, since I have a geographic connection. The world is small. I could probably find a friend of a friend of a friend who knows her grandkids or something like that. And so, long story short, she didn't have children, so no grandchildren, but I was able to find people now in their 70s and 80s who were her little neighborhood friends that would go over to her house. And I met one man, and you can read about it in my book, Marguerite, Misty, and Me. His first job when he was a child, he was paid 75 cents a week to go riding on trail with Marguerite Henry. She would ride her Black Morgan Friday, and he would ride Misty of Chincoteague. And she would like test out storyline ideas on him. And then there was another little friend that rode the donkey named Jigs, who was her inspiration for Brighty the Grand Canyon. So anyway, I thought I was writing a magazine article about a beloved horse book author. And then, like I mentioned earlier, connecting with Rebecca, and she let me ride her pony Pixie, and meeting Amanda, and then going to Chincoteague Island to seeing the swim and experience the Monday morning beach walk and the full auction and all of the events. It was like, oh my gosh, this has to be a book. And I did archival research too. I found the University of Minnesota has Marguerite Henry's personal papers. So that really satisfied the history nerd side of me. And I spent a couple weeks just reading letters between her and her illustrator, Wesley Dennis, and looking at her research notes for King of the Wind. And I found a hand-drawn map that she did of Chincoteague Island with her notes for Misty. And so as I was digging into what I thought, was maybe a magazine article or two, and realizing, it needed to be a book, she just became so real to me. And when I like held her Newbery medal for King of the Wind in my hands, I was just thinking, this is too good. This is sad to me that all these amazing little kind of clues about who she was are in boxes in a, underground archive in Minnesota. Like, there are still people who love her out there, and I want them to know more about this wonderful human who brought so many stories that just, gave us joy, and stories that still delight people today. And so, yeah, I had to get it out there. And I thought I was going to write a biography. She was born in 1902 and she died in 1997. But I felt like I was having the best horse girl adventure, uncovering who she was. And then, finally, like sitting in a kayak, watching the pony swim that I had dreamed about. And my kayak is swaying, and you can hear their deep breaths. And it just, yeah. So, yeah, I had to get it out there to the world. And do I feel connected to her? I wasn't sure how to wrap up my book. And then the last day I was doing research, I was reading and reading, and she had fan letters. I mean, she, over the course of her career, got thousands and thousands of fan letters, and she responded to most of them. And I've met so many people that are like, I used to be pen pals with Marguerite Henry. And not just like I wrote her a letter and she wrote me back. I've met many of those people, but pen pals with an iconic author. It's amazing. And so I had this moment, you can read about it in my book, but I happened upon a fan letter that was on stationery that I owned as a girl in the early 80s, with this Palomino horse, and this girl's handwriting looked like my little girl cursive handwriting.
Oh, man.
And as I read it, I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't need to write her a letter. Like the fact that I didn't really get to know who she was, like, this is such a bigger gift. I never met her, but because I didn't, I was able to explore as many aspects of her life and geography and get to know who this amazing person was. And, people say, like, don't ever meet your heroes. I could not have dreamed up a more amazing human being. And I have Amanda to thank, actually, because for many things. But there was this moment, and another thing we should tell them about Amanda is the Chincoteague Pony Drill team. So on the Tuesday of Pony Penning Week, for your listeners or for if you two ever go, there's
Fingers
a
crossed.
woman, yeah, there's a woman named Kendi Allen who is just a gem of a human being. And so anyway, I didn't know Kendi, but I was at the Chincoteague Pony Drill Team open house and Amanda was there. And I barely know Amanda. I just met her through Rebecca. And Amanda, who didn't know me, unless maybe you stalked me online and so you knew I wasn't a crazy person. But Amanda's like, hey, come over here. And so Amanda made the introduction to me with Kendi Allen. And Kendi, when she said, Susan's doing research about Marguerite, she looked at me and said, I was friends with Marguerite Henry. And so she was able to just fill in some details about her life. And anyway, so I think the gift of this connection with Marguerite is that it's brought me, like when you're a kid, you make friends in school and all that. And I think as you age, like it's harder to make new friends. And like I have made I call them my Chincoteague pony friends when I'm like, oh, that's Amanda, my Chincoteague pony. That's Margo, like I met a woman and people can read about it when Amanda was talking about the swim back, the Friday swim back. I was sitting on a boat with my feet dangling in the waters off Chincoteague. And there was a woman next to me. And I'm like, well, hey. And I'm like, where are you from? Well, I'm from Minnesota. I'm like, really? Oh, I'm a Midwesterner too. I'm from Illinois. And then Margot says, oh, I bought a pony at the auction. And I'm like, what? And she pulls out her phone and shows me this gorgeous chestnut filly. And then we just kept talking and it was like we'd known each other. And Margot and I have stayed in touch. And she took, I go out and do like book talks, and I was at Equine Fair, Ohio, and I have this thing. Anyway, Margot had a black colt lawn ornament in her yard, and she painted it accurately to Misty's Palomino Pinto white and golden coat and presented it to me for one of my events. And it's like, I've known her that long. And it's just like these amazing people who are also really passionate about horses. So thank you, Marguerite Henry, for bringing these wonderful humans into my life.
That's so sweet. There really is something completely different about like reading someone's just like their biography or a paragraph about them in a history book versus like holding something they held or like I mean for me it was like my family has some history in Yellowstone National Park. They were part of the like first rangers there. And I had never we hadn't even known about this until like uh when I was in high school. So we visited Yellowstone National Park and we went and saw their graves, and it was like it didn't hit me as something real until I was like standing there looking at like a gravestone that had like my last name on it. And so yeah, there's definitely something about seeing the physical connections or talking to people who knew them that's so different than reading about them.
For sure.
I think that's why Misty has been so enduring, is that you read that, you read about the swim, about pony pinning, and then you look and you can go, oh, I can go, this still happens, I can watch this, I can go see it, and it's a real tangible connection.
I think it's crazy how far the reach goes too. Like it's in the most unexpected places you find people who either are connected in some way or want to be connected, and it's like, wow, it's so cool. So for Susan, do you have a specific research and or writing process that helped you along the way?
Yes. I have to say that I used some of the, I taught middle school for many years. And as an English teacher, there were all these graphic organizers that we tried, because it's very difficult to get a sixth grader to write an essay and,
I
the
can only
idea
imagine.
thing. And, I mean, like sentences are okay. Then it's like, how do you put all the things together? So I was really sort of overwhelmed, and my curiosity kept taking me from one place to another. So, for example, when I discovered the University of Minnesota had Marguerite Henry's personal papers, and there were 36 boxes, it's like, okay, well, that's a no-brainer. I need to go there and just spend time reading archival documents. So I did that. Well, then I found out, okay, she was born in Milwaukee. I live in Chicago. It's about 2 hours to drive. I'm like, I'll go to they've got a historical society. Great. I'll go to the historical society. And then from there, I found yearbooks. And so those clues, were things that was, she was on yearbook staff in the teens, the 19 teens when she was in high school. And I found a college yearbook. She was in college. Well, that's interesting to me because my grandmothers would have been, were contemporary to her, and they weren't college educated women. And so, so I went from here to there. So the research was archival, but then it was also going to the places. And that is really one of the things that Marguerite did too. So for example, when she wrote Bridie of the Grand Canyon, she went to the Grand Canyon and rode a mule down to the bottom and stayed in a cave. And obviously she went to Chincoteague Island, which is where she met Misty and brought her home for research purposes. And when I give my author talks, I always do like the air quotes, research purposes.
Right.
She always wanted to have a horse, but never got one until she was a middle-aged woman in her 40s. And I feel I always say that in my talks because I feel like that's very inspiring to not give up on your pony dreams. Yeah, so the hard part then is how to make a cohesive narrative when you have all these, like, there's so many fun facts. And I would go around and around with my developmental editor a little bit on different stories that I wanted to put in the book. And she's like, Susan, that doesn't really add to the overall arc. And I'm like, but Marguerite fans will love this information. So the good news is, because I have a blog, Saddle Seeks Horse, if you want to nerd out, I was able to take some of those like deleted scenes and make them into blog posts. So so my process is, I wish I was more methodical, but I feel a little haphazard. But I have actually right now on my office wall, I'm working on another book. I've got those Post-it notes that like are huge and you can write on and have it be like poster size. And so I make these like graphic organizers that I would use for a sixth grader to like get my ideas organized.
Hey, if it works, it works.
Yeah, exactly. A short follow-up to that. What's the most unexpected thing you found? Or did you find anything in an unexpected place?
Most unexpected thing that I found. Oh, I don't know. Amanda, can you help me out? You wrote my book. Most unexpected place.
Or maybe surprising, or just something that maybe you wouldn't have thought you were going to find or pick up along the way.
I'll tell you this is really cool. And if you read my book, Marguerite, Misty, and Me, or if any of your listeners have read it, one of the things I learned from a source who knew Marguerite well is that whenever she published her latest book, her husband, Sidney, would have a leather-bound copy made. And Amanda, I don't even know if I've shared this with you. But anyway, so I thought that was so special. And they were married for almost 70 years. They were like peas in a pod. And I loved the thoughtfulness of that. And then I met someone who said, well, I think the reason Sydney may have done that is because Marguerite was always giving her books away. Like she wasn't sentimental about books. She was just a very giving person. So long story short, I knew a lot of her stuff was at the University of Minnesota, and I thought maybe some stuff at the Museum of Chincoteague, and The Rancho Santa Fe, California Library has some items. So it was kind of like the Holy Grail. Like, what happened to these leather-bound copies of books that were all, special editions their husband had made? And so around this time, I think it was last year, someone emailed me, and she had been a friend of Marguerite's later in life. In fact, she was the person who boxed up a number of the archival things and sent them to the university after Marguerite died in 1997. And she said, I have the books. And so I was like, oh my gosh, they exist. That wasn't just a legend. And
That's
so
crazy.
so I of course emailed back, that's amazing, and kind of loosely said that next time I'm in Southern California, I would love to connect. And because it would just be so cool to see them, or at least see a picture of them.
Mm.
Yeah, so I don't know if that really answers your question, but that was
No,
something
for sure.
really amazing.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Marguerite Henry, this is another kind of holy grail thing. She got so much fan mail, she started a newsletter for her fans. She was very ahead of the time, and had she had Instagram and Misty, she took Misty to a lot of publicity things, and so I think that was part of the draw. I mean, her stories were very good, but also she really knew how to get media attention. But long story short, I was just really struggling to find these newsletters. And I made it my mission to kind of read everything I could that she put out into the world. And then I found the newsletters at a local library, and they were they were photocopies in a blue folder that would be like the kind of thing back when you were a kid doing a report. And I checked it out of the library, and it was just so weird to me that, like, oh my gosh, these are amazing historical documents, and you guys are just letting anyone check these out. And so it was pretty cool, and there were a lot of photos in there and art by Wesley Dennis, and she answered select questions from kids and that. So that was really neat. And then the same person I mentioned earlier, who has the collection of the leather-bound books, said that she felt sorry for me when in my book I was trying to find those newsletters, and she said, I have several originals. Would you like any? So I said, yeah.
Oh,
So she sent me some of these original newsletters, and then some book plates that had illustration on them and Marguerite Henry's signature. And it really looks like a pen. I mean, it's like a giant sticker, but that just was very thoughtful of her to do, and cool.
That actually reminds me. So I was hanging with Kendi at her farm, and we were talking at the back end of spring roundup a couple weeks ago, and she's like, "Yeah, I've still got all my letters that Margaret Henry and I exchanged." I was like, "Oh," I was like, "Oh, we're gonna have to find those."
She has them, but doesn't know where they are right now.
They're in the house. But
got to send a team over there.
yeah, because actually I uncovered three Bar Misties and 3 Bar Stormies that Margaret Henry signed for her. One of them was to her in appreciation.
Oh, wow.
So we need to pass that one on to the grandkids.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something you absolutely want to inherit.
Yeah, and she told me that Margaret Henry kept, after they had corresponded, she kept a framed picture of Misty too, and Kendi's kids with her framed in her house.
Wow.
Super cool.
It must have also been ecstatic to be one of the kids that got responded to in the newsletter, like winning the lottery as a kid.
Well, it's so funny. Okay, so then the newsletters led to a book that Dear Readers and Writers that Amanda mentioned. And the cover of the book, the first edition, has this little blonde girl with a chestnut foal, and you can kind of see the mayor's side, but it's definitely like the photo's cropped to just show the little girl in the foal. So long story short, I did a blog post, posted on Facebook, and someone commented, "That's my sister," in the photo. So I was like, what? And so I have no idea. The book, I think, came out in the 60s or 70s, and you hope the person's still alive. So I said, oh my goodness, would your sister be willing to talk to me? So anyway, I got this woman's name and I called her, and she was such a no-nonsense horsewoman, still a horsewoman. And I was kind of, fangirling, like, so what did that feel like when you found out you were going to be on the cover? She's like, oh, I didn't really think too much about it. So it's like, I think I would be running, down the street, whooping and hollering and all that. But it had a little bit of a weird way that it happened. So, and it's kind of sad and sweet. Her father died when she was little. And so her mom bought a pony for the girls. I think she was probably like 7 or something. And they didn't know the pony was pregnant. So the pony had this baby. And so this woman as a little girl was just hanging out every day, as I would be, with the foal and the mare. And so a neighbor on the street worked for Rand McNally, which was Marguerite Henry's publisher, and apparently had a big camera with a lens and saw them, and the mom wasn't around, and they took a photo of the girl because they just thought it was cute. Well, then another neighbor or someone in that local area, like back in the day, companies would send out complimentary calendars, for the next year, and there'd be a picture of something on it. And so this family friend got a calendar with the photo of the girl in it. And so the mom was kind of like, oh my gosh, what is my daughter doing on this calendar?
I'm like, that couldn't happen nowadays.
No,
Yeah.
no, totally. Yeah. When I heard this whole story, I was just, because as a teacher, like, oh, that is super creepy. But anyway, so then Rand McNally reached out to the mom and I think paid her maybe like $20 or something. I have a blog post about this, in fact. Dear Readers and Writers, the behind the scenes or something. I think that's the title. But anyway, so yeah, so then a couple years passed, and then the girl got the book in the mail, didn't even know Marguerite Henry was writing a book, didn't know she was going to be on the cover, but they had given the rights to the photo to Rand McNally. And so Marguerite Henry signed the copy to the little girl. So she never met her, but I was thinking, man, I wish that was me, but she was just very like, oh, yeah, I didn't think too much about it.
That's funny. All right, so this question is kind of more of an Amanda question, but Susan, feel free to add anything. Are there ways we can get involved in the preservation of the ponies?
Yes, so we're still kind of building our archive. So I'm always on the lookout for any pictures, Misty pictures, Misty descendant pictures. If your neighbor went to pony pinning in 1978, if they have pictures, I'd love to see those. It's kind of amazing what you can find through just photos or video. We found a lot of information. For instance, we can trace, so there was a stallion currently on the island. He was made into a bar model this year, Surfer's Riptide, in celebration of the 100th anniversary. And so we've been able to trace his pedigree back to the 70s using photos, things like that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a big thing of mine, is always squinting at old photos and old videos and seeing what I can uncover. We're also, if you've had a Chincoteague pony, even if you've never registered it, or if you registered it with one of the previous registries, we'd love to, even if you don't register it with us, we'd love to hear about it, get details on it, add to our database, and or a friend that had a pony. We'd love to hear about it, even if it was, in the 50s. That would be really cool. About some other things, if you go to the island and, just support the various organizations that support ponies, like the fire company. The drill team is always out there trying to show what the ponies can do. I said my friend Kendi Allen that we talked about, she started that in 1998. With her ponies, she bought the Misty granddaughter, Misty 2, in 1988. And actually, my pony is her granddaughter. My pony sire was Misty 2's last foal, and he was born the year after Marguerite Henry died, so they named him Henry.
Cute.
But the drill team is going to be at Briarfest this year, performing and showing off for the ponies. This is their second time. They went in the 90s. also because three of the pony, Misty 2 and two of her daughters, were made into briars in 1996. So they're coming back, and throw some money their way to help them get them there. That'd be awesome to have a Facebook page. But that they're really the true ambassadors out there in the community, saying these aren't just little wild ponies out on an island. You can train them and ride them and show them and do all kinds of things with them.
And if I could add to that, I was amazed the first time I was on Chincoteague, and I went to the Chincoteague Pony Drill Team open house. One of the girls I mentioned earlier, I'm 5'9", and this young teenager, I'm guessing, was around my height. She was really tall, and she rode a pony, and she evented him, and she pulled out her cell phone and was showing me photos of this pony jumping. And my jaw dropped. Like, they are so athletic, and he was knees to nose and just had a gorgeous jump on him. And so I know the drill team, like you were saying, they're the ambassadors, and it is a long way to go from Virginia all the way to Kentucky Horse Park. So like Amanda said, if you can like their Facebook page or even share the Facebook page, and once in a while I think they have donation things, but they would really, really appreciate that.
I'll be sure to check them out. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it'd be awesome to watch some of the drills as well. I think it's really, really cool. And I love watching drills. I'm a huge fan of Portuguese working equitation, so anything that's big and flamboyant and adventurous is right up my alley.
I put a bunch of their performances on YouTube, so
I know what I'm doing after this.
This is kind of a random question, but just so before we started recording, Susan showed like an art piece that was done of some ponies, and Amanda like knew the pony, like knew the mare, like boom. And I'm just wondering, do you just have like a knowledge of all of the ones that are on the island? Like you just recognize them?
pretty much, yes.
Wow, that's really cool.
When
My
they
next question is, do you have a favorite?
not really anymore. I've been following the herds for 30 years this year. And at this point we know all the ponies on the islands have names, and we know all of them, and most of them we know their parents, and some of them know their grandparents. And but yeah, you get to know them, especially ones that have lived 20 plus years on the island. I said I don't really have a favorite, but I kind of have like certain memories of ones. There was one mare that I saw sold in 1996. I was 13 years old, and so I watched her entire life. And she has a stallion son out there, and now he has offspring on the island. So it's things like that you can kind of, when you have a history with them. And then a friend of mine, there's been ladies that have followed the herds for forever. And they had one who has since passed. She had planned on writing a book about past ponies, and had enlisted a friend of mine, Evelyn Kelly Lillard. She's passed away, and so her friend Linda Inslee, she was like, "Would you help me with this project?" So that's what we're working on. We can identify about 300 by name of the ponies that have lived on Assateague, past and present. And so that's going to be a photo book that we're deep in the middle of working on it. So you can flip through and see a pony from the 80s, and then you can see one that living out there today.
That's awesome.
And if I can attest to Amanda's knowledge of the herd, I was at a fall roundup, I think it was a couple years ago. And so and you have to hike part of the way, bike part of the way, and it's like it's not for the faint of heart to get there.
Oh, wow.
And anyway, so we get there to see the saltwater cowboys, driving, and here come the ponies. They were coming in band by band, and Amanda was like, "Oh, that's Prince's herd," and like then she's telling me little stories about each horse as they're going in, and then, "Oh, last year this horse did that," and then the stallion that swims his mares out to the other island, like she knows all these just fun little anecdotes. And then there have been horses that have made the crossing from Assateague to Chincoteague early, and so yeah, she's a wealth of pony humor and knowledge.
That's amazing.
I got to talk about it's not that far, so occasionally one stallion, or he since passed, but he would just be like, "Oh, it's about time." So he'd run everybody up, and be like, "He's over here again." There was another. They were full sisters, a year apart, and when they had a wild youth, and a couple times the pair of them swam over and were running through the streets of the. And then one of my favorite stories. I never got to see this stallion, but he was a Assateague-born Mustang. They released a bunch of them in 1977. They lost about half the herd to EIA in the late 70s. And so they brought in a bunch of Western Mustangs, and most of them they had struggled with the environment. This guy was born to one of the mares, and so he lived there. He died in '94. But he was quite a character. He actually injured his jaw as a young horse, so his name, everybody called him Broken Jaw, because I don't know how he ate. But he has Surfer's Riptide is one of his great grandfoals.
Wow.
They said that a few times they tried to keep, because of his malformed mouth, they tried to keep him back and not swim, and he wouldn't have any of that. And he would go after his mares, because he had the largest herd for quite a few years.
I mean, he must have been doing something right. Like, if he had the largest herd, like
he's a old favorite. Now that I've kind of learned more about his story, it's fascinating.
Also, just a kind of random tangent as well. I know that there's a lot of people on social media who kind of make it their jobs and lives and hobbies to sort of follow around the wild herds around the countries and whatnot. Are there any like regulars that outside of like your direct circle who are doing that, or really love doing that, or have sort of made stories about certain horses or anything like that?
There's a ton of people follow the ponies. Some of them have actually never even been to the island. They follow social media. There's quite a few Facebook groups. Actually, I started following the ponies on an old email digest group.
Yeah, lots of fan clubs, never ending.
Oh yes. But you can really get interested in the there's a lot of people that hike, and boat captains that are out and about, and so they'll share what they see. I know there was a foal born today that they found on a boat trip. So actually Susan, it was Sydney. I was on one of her trips. So
what did the foal look like?
It's a little black pinto.
Cute. Sydney's a horse girl too. She actually, I'll tell her story because it's kind of fun. From Southern California, came to Chincoteague to get a foal at the auction, went back to Southern California, but while the family was on Chincoteague, they just felt like this is where they belonged. So they then sold their horse property in Southern California, moved to the Chincoteague area, and she just last fall, I think it was, got certified. I don't even know what it's called, but she's a captain of one of the boats for Daisy's Island Cruises, and so she's an equestrian.
Wow,
that's so cool.
Amazing.
She was like, "This is gonna be my life now,"
Yes.
which I totally admire.
I feel somehow like a horse girl would make a really good like tour captain.
Yes.
You'd get some of the greatest facts.
Oh yeah.
I'd want to be on that boat. So for both of you, our last sort of full question, where can we find you and your work? And do you have any current or future projects that you haven't shared already or want to talk about again? Go ahead, that you would like to share.
If people want to nerd out on some of those blog posts I mentioned that were the deleted scenes from my book, Marguerite, Misty, and Me, they can go to my website, which is saddleseekshorse.com, and probably just put in the search bar Marguerite Henry or Misty of Chincoteague or something like that. I'm also fairly active on Facebook and Instagram at Saddle Seeks Horse. I show a lot of pictures of my off-track thoroughbred. And what am I working on right now? I am working on something that is probably going to take me about a year to get out in the world. And I think I will be doing a Kickstarter. I haven't even told you about this, Amanda. So I have an idea for a children's picture book that features a little girl and a Chincoteague foal, and it happens during pony penning week, and it's kind of magical. And so I've never done a Kickstarter before, but it seems like a fun way to kind of launch something and get the word out. And so yeah, but I'll be at Briarfest. Amanda will be at Briarfest. And we're actually, if anyone's listening, we're going to be doing a talk on Saturday, I think it is. I don't know,
Friday.
July. Oh, Friday. July, whatever, 11th or 12th. And at 1, I think it is. I should have looked this up, but I'll be doing a talk a little bit about the history of Misty, Marguerite Henry, and Amanda has graciously offered to bring some of her prized show and tell Misty memorabilia collection to share. And then after the talk, we're going to have a little Misty fan greet up at the Misty of Chincoteague statue at Kentucky Horse Park. And Kendi Allen and the Chincoteague Pony Drill Team, I think they may be bringing a pony over for a photo op.
Oh,
So
that's
that'll be
so cute.
fun.
I've never wished I lived in the States more right now. It's a bit of a trip.
Now I have to go, or else Keely's going to be upset with me.
Yeah, you do actually. Yeah, you do. You have to go, you have to take photos, you have to meet everyone and send it all to me. Thank you.
So I can be found through all my different projects that were mentioned in the intro, through the International Chincoteague Pony Association and Registry, and then the Chincoteague Pony Pedigree Database. I'm a primary manager for that. And then I guess it was in the mid 2000s, well, actually, or more in the early 2000s, I started getting interested in the color. You know, if you look in these breed books, they always say the ponies come in all common colors. Well, I'd been pony penning. I knew that wasn't true. So I started working on that. And then mid 2000s, I started a website called The Colorful Chincoteague. I found more genetic and color information than I ever thought possible when I first started it. I put it into a book form in 2020. I actually just recently pulled it because I need to update it. So we're also working with a genetics company, and so we're trying to build a database of the ponies, and so that kind of leads into the color and breed ancestry and such. And then my other project is Misty's Heaven. My dear friend Matt DeJarna started it in 1999. So the book Pictorial Life Story of Misty talks about her descendants and what they did and what happened to them. And so he went looking. He found that book and went looking at what's happening now. And so instead he started a website. I found it. I think we decided in 2000. And so we track Misty descendants. We also expanded, like I put my memorabilia on there. We're tracking our models and other collectors' collections. We also have a lot of information about Misty and such. So that's mistysheaven.com.
If I could add one other thing, I totally forgot. I'm terrible about promoting my book, but Marguerite, Misty, and Me, A Horse Lover's Hunt for Marguerite Henry and her Chincoteague Pony is available online where you buy books and also on my website, Saddle Six Horse. And I would love to, when people buy direct from me, I love to sign the copy and send a sticker and a bookmark and all of that. And I think if people want to know more about an inspiring author and also learn how to do Pony Penny Week, chapters 15 and 16 are instructive. And Amanda is one of the characters, although she's a real person. So it's a fun adventure to the island for those of you who can't make it. Or people who dream of going, so they'll be ready for when to go.
I thought I mentioned in the early 2000s, a couple of ponies were exported down under.
Were they?
Yes. I do not know what happened to them after about 2004.
Do you know where they came into or like where they were sent to?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but
okay.
Actually it has one of the few surviving twins that we had in the breed. It was a mare and a stallion. That came directly from the island. So yeah, I thought you might find that interesting.
I was going to say that's a rabbit hole that I could disappear down. Although...
Yeah, Keely's on the hunt now.
Yes, I'd love to know what happened to them. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, It's really funny because like there's a lot of it happens to a lot of things like when they either come over or when something happens like that it just that's the last you hear of it. Because I know that in the quarter horse industry in Australia the quarter horse stock is kind of used as stock for Australian stock horses too. But even then, like the history of the Australian stock horse is pretty well documented, but there's a lot of mud in the water around, certain stallions and whatnot. So it's always a good time to dig through that sort of stuff and try and figure out where or when or what's gone or who's gone where and what's happened. But yeah, I can only imagine it's a probably very buried very deep.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite fun facts. People want to know, oh, where's the farthest? And I was like, Australia.
Yeah. Proves that it's possible to get it happening though.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, I think that's about it. So thank you so much to both of you for taking the time to talk with us today and share about the Chincoteague ponies.
Thank you for having us. It was really fun.
Thank you. It was a good time.
Yeah, as usual, I learned a lot.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. It's like another week, another influx of knowledge to my horse brain that just keeps me fueled and running.
Thank y'all.
Very
Yeah,
exciting.
thank
you so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you for listening to History from Horseback. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. For bonus content and early access to episodes, check us out on patreon.com. We're also on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, so give us a follow for more historical horse content. Thank you again for listening. We'll see you out on the trail.
Don't. Griff just looked at me like he's gonna bark. Does Julia do that thing where she like slightly holds her mouth open as
Yeah.
if she's preemptively? Yeah, okay, good. Yeah.
Or like
Griff's good.
she does this thing where she like, I don't know how to explain it, but just the way she holds her like lips, like she's just
Yes.
like getting
Yeah.
ready, like tenses them, and I'm like,
Yeah.
no, don't.
Yeah. Griff gets his lip caught on his tooth sometimes after he barks, and then he'll just stand there, like with his lip caught on his mouth and just staring at you, like
Little
I'm gonna bark
snaggletooth.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.